surprise. So honestly, I had a completely different plan / idea for today's video. But when I was out getting my coffee this morning, I was thinking about, you know, the first couple of days I was here, walking out of the airport for my first Thailand experience, and the amount of things where I was just like, what the? Now, a few of these things you're probably gonna be ready for / expecting, but if it's your first time in Thailand, there's gonna be a few things that catch you by surprise. What's up, dirty birdies? Welcome back to another video. It is a nice, cloudy and cool day here in Jomtien. Makes it a lot easier for me to film when it's like this. One, because, well, I don't have to be a sweaty mess. And two, fucking GoPros love to overheat, man. It's a POS. If you're thinking about cameras, don't get a GoPro. Said it once, I'll say it a million times. I'm actually on a bit of a mission right now. I am going to look at a new condo, still here in Jomtien. And yes, for anybody wondering, Bangkok is still on the radar. But I made the mistake in the past of being at a place that was pretty good and then moving for just the sake of moving, realistically, and that always ended up being a mistake. And right now, I'm not unhappy with my condo, so the new place has to be really good for me to go ahead and pull the trigger. I'm not gonna tell you where it is, but I might show you. If you pay enough attention throughout the entire video, you might be able to figure it out. But in today's video, we're gonna talk about 6 or 7 things that on your first trip to Thailand, the first time you experience them or see them, you're probably gonna be like, what the hell? Not necessarily in a bad way, but it's gonna be a lot different than where you're from. Now, a few of these things are gonna be stuff that you might have to be here for a while and get a little more immersed in the area that you're in to really start to experience them. And then other things you're pretty much gonna see or feel right when you walk out of the airport. So let's start with the things that you're gonna notice as soon as you get off the plane. So the first thing you'll notice right when you land and walk out of the airport, I mean, possibly before you even land, when you're coming in, you're probably gonna notice it. And that has to do with the architecture. So not only with it being an Asian country compared to America, of course they build things different, but in America, a 200-year-old building is considered ancient. Of course, Thailand's been around much longer. Now that's not to say there's still buildings everywhere that are 400 or 500 years old, but walking around, you might see a building, condo, house, whatever, and be like, man, there's no way that people live in there. And a lot of the times they do. And then it can be funny, you could see a building that's really old and right next to it is this huge 50-floor condo skyscraper with infinity pools on the top and 7-Elevens built into the lobby. So the contrast can be pretty wild. And not to mention, of course, Thailand is a Buddhist country. So the amount of temples or wats that are pretty much on every corner is pretty wild. Now, of course, you can go to certain parts of America and you'll drive through towns and it kind of seems like there's more churches than there are people. But in general, the temples here are much more extravagant. They're just laced with gold and red. So in my opinion, they're much easier on the eye and they are absolutely everywhere. They'll be tucked away in little random places you would never think to see them. So just the buildings and even the way the streets are built and stuff like that is gonna be a lot different than home. So convenience stores built in condo lobbies is the perfect segue to our next one, and that is just holy 7-Eleven, Batman. Now, if you're from California, you're probably pretty used to seeing 7-Eleven, but they definitely get a bad rap in America. They're usually in the worst parts of town. If you want anything more than like a Red Bull or a Gatorade or some peanuts or something, you're asking for a lot. But in Thailand, it's much different for 2 reasons. One, 7-Elevens are absolutely everywhere. It's not weird to walk past one and then another 50 meters before you even get to the next block, there's another one. And of course, I'm sure you've heard the stories of the cheese toasties and all the food and stuff you can get at 7-Eleven. And the food, not even just the toasted sandwiches, generally is much better than really any gas station or convenience store food you can get in America. And another thing about 7-Eleven that I feel like not a lot of people talk about is the convenience factor for not only groceries or household stuff, anything like that. There's tons of stuff you can get done at 7-Eleven. They have kiosks out front where you can pay your cell phone, internet, all kinds of things like that. And then a lot of the time when you have to pay something here, they'll send you a QR code. If you have a Thai bank, perfect, you can just do it through your banking app. But if you don't, it can be a little bit harder. But most of them, if you take that QR code to 7-Eleven, they can scan it and you can pay cash there. So it's definitely safe to say that 7-Eleven is a staple of Thailand and a lot of Asian countries in general, but it's convenient for way more things than just groceries and food. So kind of popping back to our first WTF moment, we briefly talked about the roads. Now, of course, everybody in Thailand drives on the left, so that's gonna be different from my American buddies. In all reality though, just the way that the roads work in general is much different, and the first time you experience it, you're probably gonna be a little nerve-wracked. Everything from the traffic lights, how they work, to the on and off ramps on any freeways. In general, just the lack of freeways. We are definitely spoiled in America. I have learned that the hard way on trips to Isan or Cambodia. It is a little bit more brutal. I hear 300 kilometers, I'm like, oh, you can do that in a few hours. Not in Thailand. If you do plan on driving in Thailand, I definitely suggest kind of observing for a little bit and then try to tackle it. Because I don't know about you, and I'm a pretty confident driver. The first few times I drove here, it was intense. Now with the roads being the way that they are, brings us to our next point. Holy shit, the traffic. Okay, so minus you being from maybe like LA, Chicago, Philadelphia, a really big condensed metro area in America, the traffic here is worse. In Bangkok, I think the only real place that rivals it is LA. Now, not only is there just more cars, the roads are a lot smaller, and there's always cars parked on the side, there's people walking, there's motorbikes, there's cars trying to come the other way. So best advice, especially on roads like that, is just go slow, and then whatever idea you have of travel time, how long it takes you to get somewhere in America, just do your best to forget that, because I'll be on maps and be like, oh, it's only 10 kilometers, I'll be there in 15 minutes. No, you won't. And then with all this traffic, and there's kind of really no speed limit. I mean, there's speed limits posted, but it's more of a suggestion. People are just kind of shooting through stuff. Not every intersection has a traffic light, so it's kind of just every man for himself. And this is especially true if you're on a bike or walking. Just be very, very careful anytime you're crossing the street, because people will be ripping. And unfortunately, it is pretty common, especially here in Pattaya and Bangkok, that people get hit all the time. In America, we kind of have this thing where, oh, pedestrians have the right of way. I can just walk out and people will stop. Generally, that's true. But if you're coming to Thailand, I would definitely advise against that. I'm almost to this condo. I'm gonna go check it out, and I'll come back and hop back in with you guys, and we'll wrap this up. Consider that condo checked out. Now hopping back in, we're gonna get into a few things that will probably take you a little bit longer to notice. If you're here for a week or two, these might not be things that you're really gonna notice. Or you might, but more than likely not. Now, of course, the first thing is gonna be cultural differences, right? Now, we mentioned that Thailand's a Buddhist country, so there's gonna be a lot of differences on that end. Just in general, how Thais seem to be raised and how they deal with conflict, things are just gonna be a lot different than you're probably used to, especially if you're coming from America. But to go through every single one of those differences is just too long for this video, at least. If that is something you want to learn about, I do have other videos in the catalog kind of really picking apart what the major differences are and whether you're gonna have to deal with them or not. So if you want to learn a little bit more, you can either check those videos out, or there's plenty of blog posts and lists. You can just read most of that stuff, honestly. But of course, new country, new continent, when it comes to the culture, a lot of things are gonna be different, but you probably won't notice it unless you're really spending some time with a lot of Thais, or you're living here and kind of going through day-to-day life stuff. Now, another big one, I guess it could kind of be lumped in with the cultural differences thing, but I really feel like it's a whole beast to tackle in itself. And that has to do with dating in Thailand. Now, of course, this is another subject we would need at least an hour to fully pick apart, but just like I mentioned before, I got some videos on it, so feel free to hop back and check those out. But it goes without saying that when people have different upbringings, they want different things out of life. Of course, they're gonna be looking for different things with a partner, right? And if you're coming from America, you'll know that we kind of have this whole like list of things you're supposed to do and these certain hoops you jump through when you're first getting to know somebody. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some hoops in Thailand as well, but at least for me, they're nowhere near as big, as high. It's easier. Now, there are other things that are different from America when it comes to dating, and some people might think it's better, some people might think it's worse, but in general, just be ready for it to be a lot different. You might be surprised by some things, whether they're good or bad. But if you are planning on living here and that's something you're planning on doing, just be ready for that. Even after being here for a year and a half-ish, there's still one big one that I'm not really getting used to. It's not a bad thing. None of the things on this list are. It's just things that are way different at home that will get you thinking for sure. And that is just in general how much friendlier and nice people are here. Now don't get me wrong, I've met some dick squeezers for sure, but honestly 9 times out of 10 it's been other white dudes. Thai people in general, even just on the street, are just much nicer than most Americans are. I don't miss being in America and being on the train and just getting dirty looks or people staring at you all the time. And there's always gonna be that one guy in the comments that's like, oh well, they're just nice because they want your money and they're like wearing a mask. Let me tell you, I'd rather the mask and be nice when they want my money as opposed to in America where you can walk into a restaurant or a bar, get treated like shit, and then they're upset when you don't tip 40%. Now, of course, not everybody in America is a dick. Now, of course, not everybody in America, the West in general, is awful. But for the most part, people you run into on the street here are gonna be much more friendly than a lot of people you meet at home. Of course, when you get to Thailand, you're probably gonna have some what the fuck moments of your own. If you have any to share from your first experience in Thailand, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. Also, if any of you detectives find out which condo that I looked at / might be moving to, go ahead and drop that in the comments too. And like I said earlier, of course, none of these are bad things. They're not negatives. A WTF moment, a lot of the times, at least for me, is a good thing. On that note, I am starving. As my buddy Field Days would say, I could eat the butt out of a low-flying duck right now. So I'm gonna go grab some food. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another video. Like we always say, hope you guys have a great day. We'll catch you in the next one.